everyone. This is update for February 3rd, 2025, day 1076 of the war and of the date of date. I'm going to start with macroeconomic update, and I'm going to discuss what's going on a little bit in the US. I think it's grabbing headlines, and then I'm going to switch to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. So I'm going to start first with the European Union. There's update, there's new, let's say, information, statistical information that came out. And actually, it's not truly statistical, it's more business data about PMI and manufacturing situation in the European Union. I would say I'm not sure if this is a change in direction or it's just a seasonal temporary change, but we can see noticeable pickup in manufacturing in Europe, and specifically France, Germany, and EU, and actually Italy is in the same boat. I just didn't add it, but I think I should start adding Italy because Italy is actually surprisingly a larger manufacturer than France. So Italy has more manufacturing capabilities than France. But as you can see, the situation did improve in France, in Germany, but unclear if this is just a seasonal situation, and so it's basically one-off, or it's a change in the trend. At the same time, policy hasn't changed in Europe, so I would say that somehow it would be strange if this is a sustainable trend and a more sort of temporary situation. Let's move now to the US. There's also manufacturing data came out from ISM, and again the same idea, PMI, except I looked a little bit more in detail what's going on there. So first of all, this data again corroborates what I've shown in prior video about by sort of competitive data gathering organization, which is S&P, also showing expansion in manufacturing. And if we look sort of under the hood of this, one thing that's very positive is new orders. They're significantly in expansion. So this really gives a clue that this trend, the expansion in manufacturing, is actually meaningful, not just some kind of like one-off, sort of similar to what I've discussed in Europe. And then also these manufacturers, they hiring more people. Apparently they look sort of positive. They see these new orders coming in, and so they do hiring. The negative thing that's very clear is that inflation is still there. As you can see, the prices that's being paid by manufacturers went up, and in significant level, I would say, went up. So this really means the situation with inflation in the US is still not under control. It's definitely not growing the way it used to be in 2022. But it remains persistent and problematic. So this is just a short macro update on the situation in the West. Just want to mention about this tariffs or just generally moves by the U.S. New U.S. administration, U.S. president. What I think is probably not mentioned, that all of these moves in the end they aimed at China. So even tariffs against, or threat of tariffs, because things did not materialize so far, it's still going to be sort of lengthy negotiating process, but tariffs on Canadian products, the same as Mexican, and also moves in Panama. All of this aimed, and obviously Greenland, all of this aimed in the end at China. And then also, obviously, there are tariffs on China because what's happening is that Chinese goods, they enter US through mostly Mexico, and then some of it through Canada. So, but again, basically, what China is attempting to do is essentially send semi-manufactured products to Mexico, do assembly there, do some additional manufacturing, and then export that to the U.S. So it's in a kind of like in a way like a back door. Um, so again, what I mentioned is that all of these actions, in the end, they are going after China, and so far there is no sort of direct negotiation with China. We'll see what's going to happen, but I think that will be the key, because this was the Canada and Mexico were just initial sort of moves in this sort of much larger game that's being played, which truly not a game because it affects everybody. The other part that's going on in the US is more sort of internal. Is there's very clear desire to dismantle bureaucratic machine or administrative machine by the US president and Elon Musk and so on. And so far, they have sort of flashy victories. They definitely showing all of the fraud, abuse that's going on in this governmental agencies and mismanagement. The problem is that even, let's say, they dismantled this USAID. It just 40 or 50 billion US dollars. The reality is the whole in the US budget is roughly 2 trillion. So, which means 2,000 billions. Just so, if you remove 50 billion or 40, whatever it is, you still have 1,950 billions that needs to be addressed, and there it doesn't seem there is even a sort of ambitious goal to address those 2 trillion. The hope is, okay, we're at least going to address 1 trillion. And then things will sort of get better somehow, and there will be some kind of growth, which obviously is not gonna materialize. So the reason I'm discussing this is because these people are attempting to do really revolutionary changes in the US, but at the same time they don't have really coherent strategy and really clear vision how this is going to be achieved, and so in a way it's more sort of flashy tactical moves that don't have really coherent strategy behind it, and so and the other important part behind all of this is that this sort of new administration or a general Republican Party, they really have a year and a half, because there's another elections in the US in the fall of 2026. And if there's no results, then there are threats in terms of parliament, basically, that the Republican Party will not have majority, and so therefore then the all efforts by the president and generally this whole effort is going to get stalled. In order, this is so going back, there's only a year and a half, and that really doesn't mean there's really a year and a half. There's really about 6 months plus minus, because from the time you implement changes, there is a lag effect before they actually being felt by ordinary citizens, and so that's about like a year, 9 months at least, and that's really just the initial effects, because most of them are long term and medium term. So again, the whole sort of development in the US, if this new administration is going to be successful or not, is going to be really determined in the next 6 months, and maybe even less than 6 months. And it's very clear that they are determined, but what is so far becoming clear, or at least it's not 100% clear, but it's sort of going in the direction that there is no clear strategy how to achieve all of these ambitious goals. Now let's move to situation on the battlefield in Ukraine, or just general in Ukraine. So what's happening actually, I would say, between sort of Russia, Ukraine, and the US is, Russia is playing really long-term game with respect to Ukraine. And as I mentioned many times before, Russia has not changed its plan to basically gain control of entire of Ukraine. They're not looking to have some kind of ceasefire and freeze everything along the front lines where they are. Russia really needs all of the Ukraine, or overwhelming majority of Ukraine. At the minimum, the planned minimum is at least get sort of everything up to where I'm showing essentially just Western Ukraine can be, the maximum loss that Russia will be willing to have is really just Western Ukraine, and that even that is going to be temporary sort of concession, and eventually there will be desire to regain that part as well. And so what is Russia is doing is, first of all, and this is probably not fully understood, is there is this fight on the front line, and what it does, it's destroying or removing from Ukrainian society people who are least willing to compromise with Russia, or sort of people who strongly for independence of Ukraine from Russia. And over time, obviously, you reduce number of these people because they on the front line they die. So you have you making sort of society that's more willing for compromise, or willing to become part of Russia, and sort of Russian, I would say, Russian systems, political system, the ruling class is sensing that, and now they're actually, interestingly, they're sending messages that are actually very that along the line is that they want to win Ukrainian society. So at this point, there was I forgot the name of the official in Russia, and so she made a speech where essentially the essence of the speech: Ukrainian people are not our enemy. We should, fight to win their sort of souls, right? So it's always psychological fight. In the end, the most important part is really psychological fight, not sort of physical fight with arms and so on. It's about minds and hearts of the people. And what Russia is saying, that at this point, that they don't see Ukrainians as enemy. Ukrainians sort of part of bigger Russian society. So basically, it's sort of offering sort of remaining part of Ukrainian society is sort of message: okay, we're not your enemy. We're willing to sort of have a peaceful life together, and so on. And so that is also indicating, and on surface, it sounds like very sort of position that's sort of more looking for peace. But really, if you think sort of deeply about the situation, it's really about assimilating Ukraine, and essentially messages, come join sort of Russia, and be part of Russia. We're not your enemy. We can sort of exist, and there is sort of removing the scare from certain parts of the society that nothing bad is going to happen. And what this indicates, that Russia, again, going back to all of this, that Russia is interested in gaining control of the entire of Ukraine. They clearly not interested in sort of this relatively small piece that they managed to capture so far. And again, it does not provide for Russia's it does not address the goals of the war, and so therefore there's no reason for Russia to settle. The only reason that Russia may temporarily settle is because it's exhausted itself from the war. There's no question about that part. And I mentioned this in the past that Russian recruiters are offering more and more money for to sort of I don't know how you call it, for people to join Russian army, because they're not truly volunteers, they're not truly mercenaries. So it's hard to even describe how you would call these people, but basically people who are willing to sort of go and fight, and obviously they get paid. They get paid money. So the other part that Russia is facing is really, and we'll see if this is going to be successful, is the sanctions that are going to be with respect to Russian oil export. That's going to be going into effect. Really, we'll see that early March if they're working or not. Because if they are working, then Russia essentially will not be able to sell crude to India and China and others, and that's really going to block and really starve Russia from financial resources. I don't know. We'll see if that's going to happen. I'm somewhat skeptical. Russian political classes actually they flying to India, to China, apparently negotiating situation. This whole trying to address it. If whether they're going to be successful or not, well, we're going to find out. But that's really the biggest threat for Russia at this point. Otherwise, there's no there's no reason for Russia to stop the fight. At the same time, if I would say I look at the Ukrainian society, there's very clear big problem in terms of how to say, people. It's not that the people don't support independence, but there is very clearly unwillingness to support current political regime, and there was accident in Ukraine a couple days ago where a person from this drafting station was trying to catch people into Ukrainian army by force, which is known to be happening, and it's obviously a negative sign. But the some other person who was caught, he basically fought back and actually used rifle and killed this person from the drafting service. So what this really means, this is sort of new level, or call it resistance to this whole drafting situation, to this whole drafting system, where people start using firearms to fight back. And obviously, that really means that drafting system is not going to be able in the long run to work, because if enough people use arms to defend themselves and not to go into the army, this whole drafting system is going to collapse. It's simply not. It's really relying on compliance. If there's no widespread compliance, the system is not going to be overwhelmed, not going to be able to overwhelm resistance, and especially if it's using firearms. So this is a first accident that happened. So this person killed the sort of drafted person killed the person from this drafting service, and it remains to be seen if there is more accidents like this. But it's very clear, very negative sort of initial sort of call that's giving sort of understanding that things are not going in the right direction internally in Ukraine, that the population is, while they support sort of independence of Ukrainian territorial integrity, but the ruling class that's in charge of Ukraine is essentially basically society starting to withhold the the sort of legitimacy of this people, and basically they what they're saying is, okay, you're not doing it right, you're not the right people to bring Ukraine to successful outcome in this war, and that's essentially the message that's happening there. Now let's do a walkthrough in a clockwise fashion, starting from north and actually jumping into Kursk region of Russia, where things remain more or less the same. Slowly but surely, Russian troops are squeezing Ukrainian forces out of the Kursk region. Otherwise, there's nothing really nothing sort of new here is happening. Now, next one is north and northeast of Kharkiv, where things are on pause. No major moves by Russian side here. The next one is North Lugansk front line. Things here so far in sort of this sort of visible mapped area are relatively contained. Russian troops continuing their pressure towards village Kolodzy, but without sort of meaningful success. Where it's sort of more dangerous situation is developing is north of Kupiansk. There is a small town Dvorichna, and Russian troops managed to establish bridgehead on the western side of the Skil River, and they're preparing sort of to advance and spread from that bridgehead. And once things become a little bit more dangerous, I'll start I'll show on the map. Moving south to North Donbass front line, the northern part is pretty quiet, not much going on here. The sort of southern part, there's the most active military action is around Chasiv Yar. Ukrainian forces still holding on to western outskirts of Chasiv Yar, and there's no major advances by Russian forces in this area. Also, Russian forces, essentially the similar situation is in Donetsk, where Ukrainian forces are squeezed to the western outskirts of Donetsk. Now let's move to central Donbass front line. The situation is actually somewhat sort of remains relatively stable with sort of few exceptions, and let me just go and jump. So the northern situation around Pokrovsk somewhat stabilized. Ukrainian forces managed to contain Russian advances around Kotlina and Dachne, so there's no major losses here by Ukrainian side. And then situation sort of around this sort of southern part, Russian troops do have some relatively small gains. They managed to capture village Sribne, which is, I'm showing it's here, and essentially this whole peninsular or semi-pocket from Andriivka to Dachne is gonna be lost, or it's in the process of being lost by Ukrainian forces. Don't know how long it's gonna take. Certainly, the Dachne is gonna be probably lost in another 2-3 days, maybe 4, maybe less. And then the most of it is probably going to be lost in another 10-20 days. And so the front line most likely is going to be Andriivka, Constantinople. At the same time, Russian troops are clearly preparing to make moves in this area between Rozliv and Rozdolne, meaning they are regrouping, they are increasing, bringing in reserves So this whole sector from Rozliv all the way to Velika Novosilka is gonna get active at some point. Just not clear how soon, and more likely once this whole small semi pocket is gonna get cleared. Now let's move to Zaporizhya front line. Things here are quiet. Nothing is happening in this area. The last one is along the section of the front line along the Dnipro River, and things here are also quiet. No major moves by Russian side. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye bye.